Week 2 is in the books, and we had quite a few games here. We had Galena, Winslow, and Forreston. Then Polo, Milledgeville, our 2 game of the weeks, really panned out to be as advertised. And then you add in Orangeville, River Ridge, and East Dubuque and Galena. Shane, those were 4 pretty good games. I mean, obviously Orangeville and East Dubuque got a little bit out there, but Galena, Winslow, and Forreston and Polo, Milledgeville really played to a T to kind of what we anticipated it going as.
Right, and anytime you pick a game of the week, you really hope for what we saw Friday. I mean, you don't want to get in these blowout games just because on paper the names look good. So obviously, to know the Galena, Winslow, and Forreston game took a lot of people by surprise, myself included. And then, you know, your other game of the week, about where we thought it'd go to. So all in all, last week was really what we expected outside of the Galena, Winslow, Forreston game. But anytime those 2 teams meet, anything can really happen.
Well, and here's one of the things, you know, and I was going through and reading some stuff for earlier over the weekend after that game, and you hear a lot of people saying, well, Coach Diddick said this, and Coach Diddick said that, and it's one of those things, it's like, people, let's be real. Forreston has never put up a running clock on Galena, Winslow. So if you honestly think that Coach Diddick said that he was going to put up a running clock on everybody, you're living in a fairy tale land, and you need to come back to reality.
Well, and it goes even a lot further with him than just him. That's something that you would expect out of a complacent high school kid. And, you know, talking to the Forreston kids and where they're all from, how they're raised, you don't get that sense or a vibe from them at all. And quite honestly, it's almost repulsive to even have to comment on that tonight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I talked to a guy last year before the 2016 season started, and I talked to you about it as well. And last year I said Galena, Winslow will be a good team in 2016, but it's 2017 that they're going to be state title contenders. And all they did was prove that when they took down Forreston on Friday night. And it doesn't change my mind any bit. I still feel that Forreston and Galena, Winslow are true title contenders, and they proved that in their game. It didn't matter who was going to win that game.
No.
Rick Aaron said it best when he said, whoever wins this game is going to know where they're at, and whoever loses this game is going to know that what they need to do for the next time around.
Right.
I mean, you can't really say it much better than that. I mean, it really lived up to the hype of what it was. And people that think that Galena, Winslow winning 28-14 was a big deal, you need to keep that in check too, because what really happened was Forreston had the lead 14-12. And if you reverse back before that, when they were up 14-6, Forreston was running down the field, fumbled the ball at Galena, Winslow 22. Forreston had all the momentum at that time, and had they not caused that fumble, granted, it was great defense by Galena, Winslow, but it also came after the finish of a big run. But Forreston, if they hang on the ball right there, they punch it in for 6, and they're up 2 scores instead of Galena, Winslow. And then, okay, so in the fourth quarter, Forreston is up 14-12. It's 4th and 1 in Forreston territory, and Coach Diddick decides to go for it. You're only going for 1 yard, granted. If they get it, if they convert it, now they're running out the play clock. But punt the ball, man.
Yeah, punt the ball, but you can also see where he's coming from.
I do.
I mean, a yard is nothing to that team. They were stopped.
They were stopped, and, I mean, Galena, Winslow played a phenomenal game, both sides of the ball, not even taking any disrespect from them. I mean, honestly, the first half, Galena, Winslow came out in that game like it was theirs.
Well, and even they had a chance to tack on points in the end of the third quarter with knocking on Forreston's door. And
right. And
Forreston
shut them down. Yeah. So, I mean, it was a great ball game nonetheless, and that's where we're going to leave it. And you had 2 of the top-ranked teams. Many feel are the top 2 ranked teams in the state. So, great week and great game. So, AFC hosts the Aquin Bulldogs this week. Aquin comes in this game with a 2-0 record after they beat Warren last week 35-8, a game that you were at, Shane. And AFC comes in with a 1-1 record after they lost to Dakota 47-6, which was one of those games where we picked Dakota to win. We thought that they had the potential to win big, but we honestly thought AFC would play a little bit closer than they did. And I think AFC fans and their own players thought they could play closer too, but Dakota really put on the number to them.
Well, and that's just it. I look at that game. That game tells me more about Dakota than it does AFC. We expected that, but yet that just confirms our thoughts on Dakota, which is, we'll get into that in a little bit. Not so much about AFC. So for this game, if you're an AFC fan, I wouldn't take too much into what happened against Dakota, because you're going to see a completely different offense against Aquin.
Right. Last year, Aquin won this game that took place in week 4, and it did get a little lopsided. It was 44-15 last year. Do you think that we could see something similar to this? I mean, based off of what you saw last week when they played Warren, compared to what we already know with what Aquin has coming back, I mean, both these teams really have a lot of the same players coming back from last year's game.
Right. And it's always hard to go year to year based on talent coming back. A prime example of that was what we talked about in the intro. However, Aquin's biggest thing that they have going on right now is the injury bug. Everybody healthy, yeah, I could see a game turn out to be that 44-15 or whatever you said it was. And I don't know if that'll be the case. I see Aquin getting up big and then kind of pulling the heat back a little bit to rest some of what they have injured. I mean, Aquin's a team that can put up points in a hurry. However, on the defensive side, they will struggle with a power run team.
Well, and that's where I feel AFC would have that potential to beat Aquin, because AFC has the ability to run the ball with Adam Hart. Granted, they have a quarterback that can throw in Caleb Drew, and you still got Cody Pennick out there that can catch the ball. But last week it seemed like AFC did a lot of running up the gaps across the line, not doing anything outside, not really reverting to anything different than what they were doing. But against Aquin, AFC has the potential, I feel, to make some things happen, especially against an Aquin team that right now is missing its linebacker. And like you said, they kind of struggled in the run defense area.
Well, that's just it. I mean, Warren was blown out, but the first offensive possession of Warren, I mean, they pretty much jammed it down Aquin's throats, and there wasn't a lot of resistance. So, obviously, we expect a way more improved running team in AFC than we did Warren. So, the Bulldogs definitely have some things to work on this week in practice, and I expect them to do that, though.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I still think Aquin is going to be the favorite. In fact, they're my pick to win.
Yeah, there's no reason I won't pick Aquin to win this game. I just think offensively they have too many weapons to fall.
The Orangeville Broncos will be traveling up to play the Warren Warriors. Last week, Orangeville beat River Ridge 26-8, while Warren lost to Aquin 35-8. Last year in this game, which also took place in week 3, Orangeville beat Warren 36-28, which was actually their first win of the year to get things rolling for the Broncos as they went on to barely miss the playoffs in that week 9 finale with Polo. This year a little bit different. Orangeville already comes in the game with a 1-1 record, while Warren is off to an 0-2 start. What are some things that you think can benefit either team in this game, in this matchup?
Well, after watching Warren last week, something that could benefit the Orangeville Broncos, which they really haven't done at this point, is open up that passing game. Warren, I mean, it's kind of sad because where Warren was a couple of years ago. I mean, we're talking about a team now that has 17 kids in the program. It's just hard to win games when you don't have the personnel or the athletes to match up to some of these games or some of these teams. And you group that with an Orangeville team that has the ability to throw the ball, and I look for them to throw the ball more going forward. I just think that Orangeville will have far too much success throwing the ball than Warren will trying to stop it.
Well, and here's the thing that I see with Orangeville. Granted, Carter Kleckler actually led the Broncos last week in rushing yards, but a lot of their offense still facilitates through Austin Guy primarily. And granted, he's your quarterback, so obviously things are going to start as he goes. But they utilize him a lot on the play action passer run.
Right.
And to me,
he's keeping it more than when he was last year.
He is. And to me, not saying he's not a great athlete, because he is. And, I mean, you saw Caden Getz get a couple of receptions in there, scored his first touchdown of the year, so that was great to see as well. But I think they still need to open up some more opportunities in their run game. I mean, I know they're trying to. They've been running the ball, don't get me wrong. But their line play is not allowing them to get some of the yards that I feel they should be getting with the talent they have in the backfield, which puts a lot of pressure on Guy to make plays, whether it be rolling out and throwing or running the ball. Granted, he's got enough ability to beat a lot of guys in that aspect, but down the road, that could become a problem as it becomes more predictable.
Right. I just think that this matchup in particular, all the things you're talking about, is a good opportunity for Orangeville to really get going on. Excuse me. Warren can move the ball in spurts on offense. It's just, I mean, all the way down from their size down to their numbers. I mean, it's hard to talk about because of all the things that they don't have, unfortunately.
Right, and that numbers thing does become an issue. And, I mean, looking at Warren's roster with the depletion that it is currently, and looking at Orangeville's roster and thinking just a couple of years ago how depleted they were and where they're at today. Right. But Orangeville does have good, solid athletes. Not saying Warren doesn't. I mean, they do have some athletes.
Warren has a few pretty good athletes that would start on any other school in the upstate division.
Right. And I'm not taking anything away from Warren on that. I really not. I just feel that Orangeville has a little bit more talent.
Right.
There's a talent gap there. And that's why I think the Broncos will win this game. They still need to work out some kinks because I don't feel like the Broncos are firing on all the cylinders that they could be or should be.
Right. And I got to take the Broncos on the road, too. You know, we're talking about a team that probably feels like they should be 2-0 right now. Kind of still something a little left to prove, and I don't see any reason why they shouldn't win this week.
The Polo Marcos are hosting the Edwardsville Lutheran team. Last year, Edwardsville Lutheran co-opted with Madison, and actually last week they played and got drilled 56-0. Polo, on the other hand, barely lost in a good game against Milledgeville, 14-6, in what was our upstate game of the week. Obviously, this is the first ever meeting between these two teams. Don't really have a lot of information on Edwardsville Lutheran outside of the fact that even in their co-op with Madison the last two seasons, they were 0-9. Obviously, here this year, they're starting off with an 0-2 record. Just lost 56-0 to Madison, which it was Madison's first win in like 25 years.
Right.
As Madison being on their own. Madison is 2-0 on the year, but that's another point. The only thing I was going to say there is Du-Pec will face that Madison team coming up in week 6. So, but they really haven't played anybody. I mean, they played Ed Lou, and then they played Rockford Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, which was the former co-op with Warren. So that's kind of where I was just tying that into.
Right, and this is where I normally talk about an opponent that I really don't have any information to talk about. So, outside of a long bus ride coming down from the East St. Louis area, that's hard to overcome as it is anyway. I mean, that's generally something that we used to see in the playoffs back in the 1 through 32 layout that we don't get to see anymore. And I mean, I look for Edwardsville Lutheran to kind of enjoy it a little bit, to go home with a loss, but nonetheless, get out of the area, see a team you haven't seen. Same with Polo. You're at home. Be glad you don't have to go down there like Du-Pec does in a few weeks.
Right.
Especially,
I'm sure Du-Pec will enjoy that trip.
Right. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a Saturday. I mean, this is a
Friday night game.
Friday night game.
Yeah.
They're probably leaving at noon, so at minimum. So, Polo's found themselves in a couple of close games. Won one and lost another one. Maybe they feel like they should have beat Milledgeville. Who knows? I got to take Polo for the fact they're home. Splitting of the co-op from the other team, bus ride. Polo's an NUIC team. We've seen how the NUIC teams have fared against the South. The proof's in the pudding, really.
Yeah, I mean, the NUIC against the South, like you said, speaks volumes. But, I mean, Polo's a team that we anticipate not only just being a playoff potential candidate, but a playoff qualifier.
Right.
And I'm sorry to say, but Edwardsville Lutheran is not at that caliber. So I agree with you. I like the Marcos at home, and really, I like them fairly big.
I do too. And going forward, it's almost unfortunate for Polo. You're in a tough spot because the upstate, really had to absorb some games in order to fill out their schedule. And, looking at it, you're probably not going to get playoff points from Edwardsville Lutheran. So
no playoff points, but you do get to play the game.
Right, exactly.
That's better than taking a forfeit, in my opinion.
Exactly. Like a few teams had a few years ago when Peck didn't field the team. So
correct.
You train 9 months for 9 weeks. You want to play the games.
Yep.
Regardless of what that team's going to get you in the playoff points, and nobody's going to want to talk about playoff points anyway. You want to get to that 6-win mark. That's what's on Polo's mind. So, I just look for them to take care of business Friday night.
I agree with you there. Polo is going to have a heyday with Edwardsville Lutheran. Shane, we got an interesting one here where we have River Edge at Galena. This is a first time ever meeting between these two teams since River Ridge broke off from Warren River Ridge. Both teams do come in this game 0-2, as River Ridge lost last week to Orangeville 26-8, and Galena lost to East Dubuque 25-7. Both games were somewhat close. Obviously, we mentioned them in our intro, but nonetheless, still 3-score losses. Kind of tough to tell who's going to break away in this game to get that first victory of the year. I think it's going to be a really good, hard-fought football game. At least that's what I anticipate it being. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, Galena, kind of sad to say we're talking about Galena in this state, whether or not, I'm sorry, but whether they're going to beat River Ridge. I mean, that's how far they've fallen, and no disrespect for River Ridge, you have a very winnable game here against a historically good school. I have to agree, though. Galena has talent and everything to win this game. It's just they haven't won games that they should have over the last few years for reasons whether they weren't adding up to the other schools or whatever the case may be. That's just where we're at with talking about Galena football at this point. It's a cycle. Everybody, if you're in it long enough, everybody kind of experiences this unless you're Lena Winslow.
Well, 1A, 2A football, you're going to go through them cycles. I mean, it's just the way
exactly.
It's just the way it works.
I do like the fact that Galena does have some offensive weapons that could very well benefit them. They have hard backs and quarterback that can throw the ball well. To be honest, they played East Dubuque a little closer than I thought it'd be, so that's encouraging. Maybe they're working on some things and they'll finally get that win against River Ridge.
You know, it's interesting, though, because we're in a panel with some other media members, and a lot of those media members did pick Galena to beat East Dubuque last week. We were one of the few ones that did pick East Dubuque to beat Galena. And I would think that a lot of that relies on the Galena of the past and their tradition. So I'm glad that you brought up the history and everything else, because I do see this as a winnable game for River Ridge. But being at home, I still like Galena in this game.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with that assessment.
Okay, so this game is West Carroll at Amboy. Last year, Shane, this game was played in Amboy as well. It was a loss that West Carroll took 28-6. This game also came in week 3, and it happened to be Amboy's homecoming. I feel, and you probably feel, that this is a game that West Carroll probably should have won last year, and it's a potential game that probably kept them on making the playoffs. This year, West Carroll comes in this game with a 1-1 record, while Amboy comes in with an 0-2 record. West Carroll last week taking care of Du-Pec 44-0, while Amboy lost to EPC 40-0. What do you think this matchup's gonna be like this year?
Well, I look for West Carroll to really get off and running in this game. Obviously, and I don't mean literally. I'm just talking mentally prepared. I mean, you said it. You look back at last year, and that's a game. If West Carroll wins, they're playoff bound. West Carroll has improved dramatically since last year. Played a very, obviously, a good game against Lena Winslow. The score was a lot closer than the game was, but nonetheless, they were in the game and had multiple chances to score more points, just didn't. And as far as Amboy goes, I'm afraid it's another long year ahead for them again.
Yeah, I mean, looking at what Amboy has coming up, okay, so next week they play Du-Pec, East Dubuque, Lena Winslow, Dakota, Galena Forreston. So really they got 2 more games on their schedule where I feel, me personally, feel that they can potentially gain a W. But I agree with your assessment of what West Carroll is. In fact, last year, had West Carroll played Amboy weeks 5 through 9,
when they were clicking,
West Carroll wins that game.
Yep.
And sorry, Amboy, but that's just how I feel.
Well, that's just it. And you're talking those weeks when West Carroll was clicking. I mean, to jump back a little bit, we were sitting there in the press conference, the state championship game, and Didick was asked who helped him prepare for this game the most, and he pointed right to that game against West Carroll.
That's right, he did, because of the type of offense that they ran with they mixed it up with the spread, they ran the jet sweeps, they ran the quick outs. They did a lot of things that really had Forreston prepared for them, because it was the only team that they saw do it in their entire run.
Right, and West Carroll kind of has a history of really being overlooked. I mean, they've had some decent teams. They've just always kind of fallen in that 4-5, 5-4 category where they won't necessarily compete with the top of the conference, but they're not going to get blown away. They're more geared to compete with the middle 3 and 4 team.
Well, and here's what West Carroll currently reminds me of is Forreston about 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Very well said.
Where Forreston was a very quality team, but they lost to the teams with the name on the jerseys.
Yeah.
As soon as they saw Dakota, Lena Winslow, or somebody of that stature, that game was over before they ever took the field.
Right.
And for Forreston's sake, it was really that 2011 team that changed that for them and got them going on the direction that they're on currently. And that's where I feel West Carroll's at right now. I mean, you look at their games, like you said, they have athletes. They have great athletes, but they can't beat the upper echelon teams. Yeah, sure, 2015 they beat EPC. Everybody beat EPC. They were 2-7,
right,
and they started all freshmen. Well, them freshmen are now juniors, and them juniors are stronger, and they're better, and yada, yada, yada.
Well, that's just it. And, I mean, you can jump the gun a little bit here, and I'll make it quick. they played Tri-Valley, their first round game 2 years ago. Tri-Valley went on to win state. That was one of Tri-Valley's closest games.
Yeah, 22-0. Granted, it was 22-0, but it was one of their closest games, and Tri-Valley dominated their state championship game. I mean, me and Kerry were at that game, and man, Auburn didn't even stand a chance in that game.
But as far as this one's concerned, West Carroll over Amboy.
Yeah, I like West Carroll as well. Go Thunder. Okay, as you can see, we got a guest here, Perky the Panther. Actually, we lost a bet. Kerry picked Lena Winslow beat Forreston, while me and Shane did pick Forreston and beat Lena Winslow. And ironically, he's wearing the number 1 because we do have Lena Winslow ranked number 1 in our polls now. So great job, Lena Winslow, on that win last week. You deserve it. This week they're playing East Dubuque. East Dubuque comes in at 1-1, while Lena Winslow, coming off that big game against Forreston, comes in at 2-0. East Dubuque did beat Galena last week 25-7, while Lena Winslow beat Forreston, the previous number 1 team, 28-14 down in Forreston. Last year, Lena Winslow won this game 43-0, and it happened in week 8 in a stretch where East Dubuque was trying to win a game to get to the playoffs. And they hit the Panthers at the wrong time of the season as the Panther train was just getting rolling.
Yeah, well, based on what happened last week, they hit them at the wrong time again this week. For all intents and purposes, you know, we talked about East Dubuque's schedule and all our previews and everything, and we're looking at winnable games, and we expected them to play a closer game against EPC opening the season. That turned out to be bad. They beat a pretty bad Galena team by a couple scores. East Dubuque, I just don't feel there's not a good time to run into Lena Winslow right now. The only thing that could really benefit East Dubuque is maybe a little bit of a letdown, which I anticipate a little bit of a letdown because that's naturally human instincts here. You're going from Forreston to East Dubuque. No offense to East Dubuque, but you're playing the reigning state champs, and you're going to be hosting East Dubuque. So obviously you're going to be coming down off that a little bit. So I look for, actually, I'll go ahead and say it. Granted, we all know how this turned out last week when I said I'll go ahead and say it about Lena Winslow. But I anticipate a slow start for Lena Winslow, but it won't last long.
I'm going to say opposite of you because, yes, they're coming off of a high, but Ravion said it best last week when he said, we can't make this Forreston game our Super Bowl. And when your star athlete, and I'm sorry, Lena Winslow, but he is your star athlete, let's just face it. When he comes out and says that we can't make this our Super Bowl, and he's your senior leader, he's a captain of the team, I believe him. He's got something to prove. Lena Winslow has something to prove. They made their point last week when they beat Forreston in Forreston, which really wasn't a shock because
they win in Forreston.
They win in Forreston. I mean, history speaks for itself. I mean, they're now, 10-1 against the Cardinals down in Forreston in history. So, hats off. I mean, you guys played a hell of a game. You came out. You proved us wrong. But you guys, what really impressed me about you guys was how in shape you were. I mean, you were in shape. You were ready. You were prepared. Your off-season has proven itself. And, of course, Coach Aaron made some good things. Changes in his offensive and defensive lines that really helped spark some things early in the game and then eventually later in the game when it really mattered the most. So, I mean, Lena Winslow, you guys played a great game. We anticipated you being a state title contender, obviously. Just weren't expecting it early in the season. We knew we would see this kind of play later in the season.
Right.
You proved us wrong, so hats off to you guys. East Dubuque is in for a challenge. They do have to come to the Lee Wynn Athletic Bowl. And if anybody was watching on Facebook last week and Twitter, I put out there that Lena Winslow is 37-6 since 2010 at home. They don't lose. They got an 86% winning percentage, and that includes playoffs and regular season. So I like Galena Winslow, and I like them big like they did last year.
I agree.
Going to Du-Pec here. This game's going to be in Durand this week, Shane, as Durand will be hosting their senior night. But they run into the host of EPC. And EPC comes in this game 2-0. Du-Pec comes in game 0-2. And EPC has really blasted everybody so far that they've played in the first 2 weeks. Last week it was Amboy 40-0, while Du-Pec lost to West Carroll 44-0. Last year, granted, this was just Pectonica at the time, but EPC took care of Pectonica 49-8 last year. I don't like to say it because deep down I'm rooting for Du-Pec to be good this year. I'd like to see them come together, get some wins on the board, as a lot of people are. But EPC is coming out of the gates like they got something to prove.
And, just to back up a little bit here, you talked to some people from Du-Pec who are in the know, and they're still a couple years away from getting to where we can really be talking about them at the top of the board here. In the meantime, you got to take your whips, your new program. This is generally speaking what happens when you form a co-op, when you're bringing in 2 schools who haven't been very successful lately. Granted, it was implemented at a lower level, so the kids were familiar with what system they're going to be running, but you're going to take your lumps for a while until you really get everything ironed out. I mean, we're talking on the field all the way back to the classroom and the politics in between that follow a co-op naturally. As far as EPC is concerned, no disrespect to Du-Pec, but this is the last game on the cushy side of the schedule for a few weeks. I anticipate a victory for EPC, but obviously it gets harder going forward.
Much harder.
So this is kind of a last go-all tune-up to get ready for those next few weeks.
Yeah, and speaking of those next 2 weeks, we're talking Forreston and Galena Winslow. And then they run into a Galena team that they'll probably beat handily in week 6. But then week 7, they got Warren. West Carroll. And then week 8, they follow up with Dakota. So,
right. And a Polo team then the crossover schedule.
Polo
so
too.
We'll see what's going on there by then.
So, yes, EPC is coming into this game firing on all cylinders, what looks to be, obviously, by the big scores that they put up. They're ranked in Class 1A at number 5. We have them at number 11 in 2A.
Where they belong.
But and we do feel that 2A is where they'll make the playoffs. You don't either. We don't see the number getting as high as 320.
If it gets to 320, we got a problem.
Right. I mean, you look at the 10-year history, and that number has only reached 320 once in the last 10 years. So,
but hats off to you, EPC. I mean, you've won the games you should. I anticipate that again. You've done all you can to this point. Kind of enjoy getting kids on and off the field, putting it away early, and get ready for that Week 4 matchup.
Right, and for Du-Pec, come out, play your best, try your hardest, do what you can. But I do, like you, I like EPC in this matchup. Our upstate game of the week brings us back to Milledgeville, where they will play host to Stockton. Stockton comes in this game with a 1-1 record, while Milledgeville comes in with a 2-0 record. Last week, Stockton lost to state-ranked Marquette, 35-16, which we kind of anticipated that was going to happen. Heard a lot of oohs and ahs when those scores were being lit off, but we anticipated it.
It's a weekly thing.
Milledgeville did win 14-6 against Polo. Last year, this game took place in Week 7. Granted, this was the Hayden Fox-led team, and Stockton waxed Milledgeville 44-0. This week, Stockton should be healthy. They should see a full staff back in place. But Milledgeville does have a lot of potential. Granted, they've kind of gotten off to a slow start on the scoreboard from what I expected. I mean, so far they've put up 28 points in 2 weeks, eking out 14-6 wins in back-to-back weeks. And actually, it's kind of similar to how they started off last year.
A lot of mistake football. Fortunately for them, though, they've actually gotten off with wins. They're going to have to clean it up a little bit against Stockton. At one point, Stockton was leading Marquette. It was early in the game. So, I mean, you can take that for what it's worth. But that game went exactly kind of what we thought it would be. You know, Marquette pretty much had that game in control from start to finish. Going forward, I feel like that does help Stockton with this matchup because they have seen a higher quality opponent that really showed them a lot of flaws for them to work on things. And like you said, they're full staff this week. And, I mean, that's huge. In such a small school football game, a couple kids is the difference between going 7-2 and 5-4.
Or 3-6.
Right. So this will be a very tightly contested game, and I mean it's really no surprise that it is the upstate game of the week.
No, it's not a surprise. I mean, you look at what Milledgeville did last year. Okay, they were 5-5, lost in the first round of the playoffs. Very tight to Marquette. So obviously Milledgeville knows how to play Marquette, and this Marquette team that Stockton just got done playing is no different than last year. Maybe a year older, but I mean they graduated some kids that were starters last year as well.
That is good.
Right. Stockton obviously lost the majority of their team from last year.
Right.
Granted, they still have athletes. We've said that in our previews. We've said it in the last couple of weeks. Stockton has athletes. We know that.
Right.
We're not stupid people. But this game is in Milledgeville. Milledgeville is tough at home. They always have been, with the exception of the few down years that they have.
Yeah.
But when they have, you look at their time when they have athletes coming through the school, they're a tough team to beat at Milledgeville. In fact, I'll raise my hand. I never beat Milledgeville in Milledgeville when I played. So it is. It's a tough place to play.
And I mean, how many schools can't we say that about? I mean, you mentioned it just a couple segments ago. How Winslow is tough at home. Dakota's tough at home. Galena. I mean, Galena's dropped now because of their.
They've dropped in the last few years, but if you look back over the last 20,
you do not want to go to Galena and play.
No.
It's an intimidation factor. You know, it's the setting really. And Milledgeville's had some very good teams over the years to really kind of build that of okay, we don't let someone come into our house and push us around. I don't feel Stockton's going to come in and push Milledgeville around.
No.
But I also don't feel Milledgeville's going to really take it to Stockton. My biggest thing here is how we've talked to people who say Stockton will have a problem when they run into a good running team. We'll see what that holds this week.
We will, and I mean, Milledgeville doesn't have a power run team per se, but they do run the ball.
Exactly.
And they got good backs.
Yep.
They do have good backs. They're not of what I would call the physical back. I mean, they're not like Trey Griffin or Jake Apple or somebody who's going to plow you over. But anyway.
But I'm gonna take Stockton.
I'm going to take Milledgeville on this game. I think they're going to ring that bell again. All right, our Northwest game of the week takes us back to Forreston, where they will play host to Dakota. Dakota comes in this game 2-0, as Forreston comes in this game 1-1. Shane, we should see Dakota probably slip into the AP top 10, but if you really look at a lot of polls, including our own, Dakota's already in the top 10. Forreston, after the loss last week to Galena Winslow, most likely will not drop out of the top 5. I don't speculate. Dakota last week did beat AFC 47-6, and Forreston lost to Galena Winslow 28-14. Last year, just like the previous year before that, these teams met in week 3, and Forreston won this game 21-0. Last year's team obviously had a much better defense than what this year's team is.
At this point.
Forreston's still very good. I do feel after watching them last week, they do have some holes they need to fill, specifically at the linebacker position. Backside help needs to be a big key addition to what they do, because a lot of times you saw Lena Winslow bouncing those runs where the ends were blocking in, but then that run would bounce outside because the back would just, it's almost like a Flintstone video.
Gone.
And that's because the backside help wasn't there. I think if Forreston focuses on that backside help, they close that off because all they had to do is attack. If they attack, different ball game. Anyway, Dakota's playing lights out right now. Granted, they haven't played
anybody. Sorry. But yeah.
They haven't played the opponents that they're going to play in their schedule. And that starts this week with Forreston.
Right. Well, you're talking about Forreston defense, and realistically, if you were to group Dakota's defense with Forreston's defense, you would have one solid defense throughout, I feel. Where Forreston lacks, Dakota is very strong. You know, Dakota's front eight, good luck. I mean, they stop the ball. Where Dakota's fault is on defense is in the secondary. I'm not going to say anything that isn't already known. I mean, their secondary has issues. They need better positioning, because I guarantee at some point in this game, more than once, you're going to see Barklow just streaking down the field and he's going to be wide open.
Well,
I guarantee it.
To Forreston's advantage, that's what they should be doing.
Right.
I mean, last week, Hunter Dawes did drop back 14 times. Granted, he only completed 3 passes, but the Dawes to Barklow connection was there. It just didn't connect. And I think that play is a huge play. You saw it twice last year. You saw it in the state championship game against St. Teresa. You saw it in the quarterfinals against Lena Winslow. Right. And both of them were caught by Barklow, who went for the touchdown on both of them.
Well, and that's just it. You know, that's been such a success for them last year. You implement it into this year. And as far as this game goes, you know, Forreston had a lot of success running to the outside on Dakota last year. Dakota was not a fast team last year. Dakota is very fast this year.
Well, based off of what we saw against Galena in week 1.
Team speed is leaps and bounds better than it was last year.
It is. And it's not so much that Dakota got that much better. They are stronger. They are quick. They were quick last year.
Yep.
Last year, they were just more inconsistent. This year, they've proven so far to be more consistent. And that's what they needed to do. You got to be execution. I mean, I remember the days of Jim Munro coaching at Carthage. I mean, he ran 4 plays to the right, 4 plays to the left. I'm going to execute those 4 plays on each side of the ball to 100% perfection, because those are my go-to plays. And that's what Dakota needs to look at. Hey, what can we do to simplify it so that we're a little bit more consistent? I mean, you don't need to have everything going the way it is. So, I mean, Dakota has a lot of things to work with. They don't need to make their playbook so huge that they have all these plays to remember, and now they're screwing them up because they got kids out of position and whatnot. As far as Forreston goes, though, going back to what you were saying, I mean, their line play is really the area that they need to improve on outside of their linebacker play. I'm not going to name names, but there was key instances where I saw backside help against Lena Winslow. Instead of attacking forward, they were dropping back, and then you saw safeties coming across to make the play. Sorry, but if you're playing the linebacker position, your first thing that you should be doing is going after the run. That's what you have the safeties and the DBs for, is for the pass. Attack the run. And I feel that's a big area where Lena Winslow took advantage of Forreston last week. As far as Dakota, you know, they're playing at a higher level, they have some opportunities in their offense to exploit some things that Forreston does. And honestly, there are things last year that you just could not exploit on Forreston. And that's where one team needs to take advantage of that. And if I were Dakota this week, I'm going to be looking at that Lena Winslow film.
Well, that's just it. And not to discredit you at all. I'm just saying, if the fact that you see this going on, there's how many other people on the coaching staff of Dakota that have now seen this film. I mean, you can make up your mind. They've seen it too. I mean, who are you going to run at? You going to run at this side where everybody's doing their job, or are you going to run at where a couple kids are slacking off? I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Well, and that's where, okay, so for Forreston's line, I mean, you got a Braden Walton and Michael Singley and Mitchell Hines. Those are your three core guys. Those guys need to be able to play, in my opinion, they need to be playing both ways because they're your strongest athletes. I understand. You got to keep them fresh. You got to keep them going. Cramps was an issue last week for both sides of the field. In my opinion, I don't know how cramps was an issue when it was only 62 degrees out and it actually had dropped into the 40s by the end of the game. But it is, and it's just part of that's because it's early in the season yet. It was a very physical game. They wore each other out. But Dakota has their opportunities, and I think Forreston has some opportunities where they can build on what they have. And really, their line play, it's not that they have bad defensive or offensive linemen. Their linemen are good. They just got to get going. And I felt like last week, Lena Winslow controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and that's where Lena Winslow won the game.
Right. And for me, for my keys to this game, I still believe they're, I don't want to say significant, I still want to put, there's a good chunk size gap in these two teams right now.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I don't want to step on toes or anything, but if Forreston plays their game, they should win. Now, however, I expect a more ground and pound game between both teams very well, more so than last year because, you know, Dakota will contain the outside runs for the most part. You're going to force everything up the middle. You're going to have a hard time running it, you know, the size that Dakota now has. And for Dakota, what it's going to come down to, for, in my opinion, I mean, Engelbrecht and Peters and all them, you know, they're your premier backs. But if Dakota's going to want to move the ball, it's really going to come down to Kyle Bordner's arm. You know, we're talking about just a starter that's got 2 games of varsity starting experience under his belt. You're going to a tough place to play. Very capable quarterback, but, you know, you just hope that he's able to keep composure in a big siding and able to do his job.
Well, and for Dakota to win this game, and I'm going to keep this short, but for Dakota to win this game, they're going to have to do multiple things, and they're going to have to do them effectively and all the time. You can't just sit on one play. You're going to have to change things up. Run the outside, run the inside, run the outside, run the inside, change it up.
Short dumps, too, would help.
I like Forreston in this ball game.
Yeah, I got to take Forreston, too. Just too much right now.
So this is our Week 3 matchups and predictions. We hope you get out to the games this weekend. There should be some good games Friday night. As always, root for the NUIC.